Hello and welcome to this second podcast prepared by Profweb and SALTISE. I'm Ryan, an editor from Profweb.ca, and I'm joined by Kevin, a physics teacher from Vanier College, who is also a member of the SALTISE Active Teaching and Learning Community of Practice. Today, we're joined by Rhys Adams from Vanier College and Phoebe Jackson from John Abbott College. We will be hearing from them about their transition to an alternative teaching approach. In one case, we will be hearing about synchronous real-time delivery of a course, and in the other, we'll be hearing about an asynchronous or self-paced approach. In both cases, we'll be hearing about our guests' use of a platform called CourseFlow that they used as part of their respective approaches. I'll hand the interview over to Kevin.
Thank you, Ryan. Each of our guests, would you please introduce yourself? Maybe start with Phoebe.
Sure. My name is Phoebe Jackson, and I am a physics teacher at John Abbott College.
And I'm Rhys Adams, and I teach physics at Vanier College.
Great. Now, looking back a few weeks ago, when it was announced that we would attempt to finish the semester at a distance, can you describe a little bit the process that led up to you both having a plan for alternative teaching? Maybe we can start with Rhys.
Sure. It was a frantic moment. There wasn't much of a plan at first, but then the college made had suggestions. They told us they wanted us to keep the students busy, keep them engaged. They asked us to be flexible, and they also suggested that we deliver in an asynchronous fashion. So whatever competencies that we kept and whatever assessments that we did, we tried to keep that in mind, that not every student could be live with the teacher at all times. So plan for the rest of the semester quickly changed as I had to drop all of the activities that I would have done in class and maybe short lectures. And then it went to preparing these learning modules, which were summaries, and some of them were already built a little bit, but I had to enhance them, add to it, and I tried to take the remaining part of the course into 4 different modules and have materials to accompany each module. So students would get to engage with my Daylight as a study guide companion to the modules. They would have conceptual questions to do after the modules were done. There were web work assignments as well, suggested readings and videos. And so the students could kind of pace their way from module 1 to module 4. But it was a challenge for the students to adapt to that. But it was a stressful time for me to get as much material done ASAP for the students.
Okay, and those were asynchronous modules that they were doing?
Yes.
Great. And Phoebe, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your approach and experience?
Sure. It started out very much like Rhys's in that we really didn't know what we were going to do. And our college gave us quite different directives in that they wanted us to teach as much as possible live and synchronous. But the request for flexibility was definitely there, like Vanier. So our department met and we kind of made some guidelines before any one teacher went in and made their plans. And then we met within the courses as well. So I teach electricity and magnetism this semester. So we all met and we made some broad guidelines, like we decided what curriculum we would actually remove from this semester because we knew we were going to be working on a lot less time. We weren't sure how much less, but we knew no matter what, it was going to be slower to teach online for our first time. So we decided on the curriculum. We decided on the form that our assessments were going to have as a group, with some room for movement for each teacher to kind of do what they felt best. And then I was finally free to start planning, in which case I think I was teaching within half a week from then. But because we were going live, it wasn't so much work for me to move online. I kept all my out of class stuff the same because that was already online. And then I just had to move my actual what happened in class onto an online platform. And John Abbott used Microsoft Teams and I run my classes very much like I ran them in the classroom, but online. So there was a learning curve for me to how to use the technology to do that. And I think that's where I spent most of my time. And then just reorganizing everything and sharing with my students so they knew what to expect before we started.
Like I have a question, Phoebe, if you could describe how you go about using Teams in that scenario with a synchronous type approach.
Yeah, sure. So
because you have a class of maybe
about 42.
Like 30, 40 students. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So they all join the class meeting when the class starts. So if you use Zoom, it's like a Zoom meeting, but it's on Teams, and I can't see them all at one time, but I can see them 4 at a time. And they can go into breakout groups. So they each have a private channel, and we already had teams, designated teams, permanent teams within the classroom. So I just made private channels for each team. And then when it's time for the teams to work together, they just go join their own meeting together. And my TAs can drop into those meetings whenever we want. And then when I want them to come back to the main meeting, I send out a group message to everyone, and they just either put their team meetings on hold or drop them and come back to the class. And we just kind of do this back and forth.
Do you, so you have some TAs to helping you, but do you yourself go and you're able to drop into these groups as well?
Yeah.
As needed or perhaps randomly?
Oh yes, randomly. What they're working on tends to be fairly scaffolded. So they don't always have explicit questions. They will call us into their group if they want help, but it seems to be more us going to them, and then we just show up, catch them halfway through a sentence, and ask them if they have questions. And that almost always results in a useful discussion, but they haven't necessarily called us there.
So you're both using CourseFlow tool developed by the SALTISE community. Could you describe the functionality of this tool and its pedagogical potential? Let's start with Rhys.
Yes, so I'm using CourseFlow right now just to document what it is I'm doing, and when I'm presenting new modules to my students and what types of deadlines I'm expecting from them. So essentially, I made myself a chart of all the expectations for the students, and then translated that chart into CourseFlow, which is a bit easier to move around if ever deadlines need to be changed. Already, the information that we received from the college and the ministry was that at one point we were allowed to extend a bit of extend our semester. We first thought that we would have to end material in early May, and then that was pushed back into mid-May. So it was easy for me to move things around in CourseFlow. My students don't see CourseFlow, but it is something that I would want my students to see in the future, because I could easily add all the materials that they need into it. So I can provide links so they can get quick access to, for example, a study guide, quick access to the links for My Daylight and for WebWorks. If I have a list of videos, they would have a quick access as well. So essentially, every time they would click on a module per se, all the materials that they need would be there and accessible to them, and then also link out to the different deadlines and assessments that I expect from them.
So is it correct to say it's a way of visually organizing your course?
Indeed, you can visualize it much easily that way, and it's flexible. And I think the potential for the students is that everything could be there for them. The way that I would see it moving forward is that if ever I had to make modifications to some deadlines or move ideas around, if ever I go back to a synchronous setting per se, it's easy for me to move that and have the students kind of go back to it every week and make sure that they know exactly what it is expected from them. So it has great potential for the use of a teacher to show to students what it is exactly we want from them and where they can get all the materials from.
Phoebe?
Well, everything Rhys said is actually spot on, I think. I haven't given it to my students yet either. But in the future, I could see that happening for sure. Unlike the other platforms, like I currently use Moodle to present all the stuff that to my students so they can access all the different online platforms we use. But it is very difficult when something changes, especially in this situation where things are constantly changes. And when I have to make modifications, it's a lot of work. So CourseFlow is great for that because you just drag something to a different time. Kevin, I think what you said about it being a visual way of organizing your course is exactly right. It shows how everything in your course is connected, not only over time, but also over like actors and location. So out of class, in class, what the teacher does, what the student does, and when all those things happen, and then how they're all linked together. So it's pretty unique.
So Phoebe, can you tell me a little bit more what a typical class meeting looks like with your students?
Sure. So everyone joins a Microsoft Teams meeting. And immediately, at the beginning of every class, in fact, a couple minutes early, I share a link to a quiz. It's just a PDF, 3 questions. We've been doing these all through the semester. And it's just a review of everything we learned from the class before. I call them review quizzes. So the students take the quiz questions, and now that we're online, they go to Long Kappa, and they individually answer the 3 questions on Long Kappa. It's just multiple choice, and they can answer as many times as they want. They don't know if they get them right or wrong. After 15 minutes, the Long Kappa for that closes, and it switches to their group. So it's a 2-stage quiz. And so now they join with their group, and they re-answer the questions again on Long Kappa, but together. And Long Kappa now does tell them if they get it right or wrong, and they have 3 chances to get it right for at least part marks. So I was already doing that in class, but with the little if-at scratch cards for the group part. And Long Kappa has replaced that for me, and it's been working fine.
I imagine since they're working through teams, they're able to talk about the answers and discuss them while they're working on Long Kappa.
Yeah, during the group part, I keep them all together with their videos and mics on for the individual component. And then when that 15 minutes is done, yeah, they go have a little video chat about the questions. So the group part's always faster than the individual part because they've already had a chance to do the questions once. And as soon as each team is done, they immediately start working on their learning guide for the day, which is like a PDF of everything we're going to learn for the day, and they can just work on that in their teams. And that's when me and the TAs circulate. And at some point after I've got kind of a feel for what needs a little bit more elaboration, I'll call them back together to the main meeting and write on my whiteboard and just discuss whatever needs to be discussed, answer questions to the whole class, and then they finish up by going back to their groups. And I keep dropping in until the end of class.
Great. So in Rhys's case, you're not having synchronous meetings with your students. So what would a typical week look like, or how much time would you give students to progress so that they can sort of follow the schedule for the semester? How does that all work out?
Yeah, and I think week is a good metric. We at first I took my 4 modules and imagined it over 4 separate weeks, and just deadlines like by Tuesday, let's say, for any pre-reading type of stuff, like a My Daily assignment or an activity that's related to the material. Because my usual class times are Wednesday mornings and Friday mornings. And during those time slots, I'm available for Q&A. So these are optional. I don't teach any new material, but I answer any questions that the students have, and the majority of the students can be there. So they're there. And if the discussions and conversations are interesting, I record it for others who aren't present, or if they want to go back to it. But it gives them a chance to ask questions about the content. I get to read what they write in my daylight, so I have a pretty good idea of what questions are coming up. I get to prepare maybe some simulations so I can kind of anticipate what it is that they may ask and what I would present. And then they go back and they have like a post assignment, which would be due the following weekend. So the Friday morning, I'm available to them again to answer their questions. And then Mondays, where we had our lab times, is where I have my asynchronous quizzes. So I have a quiz that is available for maybe a 2-hour period. And I have an honor pledge, and I polled all the students about it, and everyone confirmed that they were in a position to actually do a 20-minute quiz during that 2-hour time slot. So every week we get to finish off the material with a quiz on Monday, and that worked well for the 4 weeks. And in parallel, they had a project which had started before the crisis began. So my 41 students were divided into 11 teams working on a project. And since I was, we were allowed to assess students in a different way, we're not giving final exam, I decided to give them group problem sets that they could work in teams. So the same project groups are the groups that get to work together for these problem sets. And what I usually do is I try to meet with each group about once a week. So what's happened is that less and less students come to the optional Q&A on Wednesdays and Fridays because I meet each group for about 15-20 minutes every week anyway. So that every team gets to ask questions. They have individual questions, that's fine, but they ask questions about the content, they ask questions about the problem sets, they ask questions about the project, and they get privileged FaceTime with me, and I'm available outside of those times in addition to that. So they chat on Teams and I join them, or they send me a Mayo. And I too have an in-class tutor, and she too is asynchronous. That is, she's part of our teams. And if anybody has a question, they can text me or text her. So if I'm not available, but she is, and she tends to be more available late evenings than I am, she can jump in as well. So the students know that they have me and the tutor that they can ask. And yeah, the first week was overwhelming. Like the students saw me post a lot of materials with a lot of deadlines, and they felt very overwhelmed. But after they figured out that it was kind of this cyclical process of going through each module, it seems to be going well. And you know, as we speak, the content is finished, but the assessments are still ongoing. So whenever they need me, I'm there, and it's worked out well. I don't know if all students find that it's been positive, but my experience has been positive working this way.
Do you see any points of convergence other than the CourseFlow platform in terms of your different approaches, Phoebe and Rhys?
I would say, yeah, we use a lot of the same technology for sure. But I also think both of our classes, even now that they're online, seem to have more active learning components. And they both seem to have a lot of this self-pacing that Kevin, you referred to. Rhys is most obviously so, but my class was already designed in that way with the learning guides, because students can work through it at their own pace. They're supposed to help their teams even if they're ahead, but it's still that idea that if they want to work ahead, they can. And if they need a bit of extra time, that's fine too.
And we both rely on having students work in teams, right? So even though they're physically separate, when it comes to the classroom setting, whether the Phoebe's virtual classroom or my asynchronous world, students get to work in teams and collaborate in teams, and so they're never alone. I think all of the bulk of their learning is done in a team setting.
Yeah, for sure. And they get to see us.
Yes.
They're all getting individual time with us as well, which is different.
Maybe I meet them more now than I met them in a real classroom setting. Some would
Yeah.
show up to class and then they leave and you never see them during office hours. And now, I get to talk to them and, see their bedrooms and see their kitchens and speak to them quite frequently, which for some students I didn't know very well until now. And now I have a pretty good idea of who they are as outside of the classroom.
And it seems from what Rhys explained about what happened with the not having a final exam anymore and how you're assessing them now, we probably also have, I found that my unit assessments, which used to be in the required format of just being in class 80 minutes, so they were pretty much completely summative, are now have more formative aspects, because we did a take-home 24-hour test, which was great in itself, but it was also followed up by individual interviews with every student just for 5 minutes, in which they had a chance to kind of elaborate on and ask questions. So it felt like yours sounds as well, Rhys, like it served a dual purpose of allowing me to assess them, but also I think they learn more from it.
I think so too. I hope so. And the purpose is not to put them in a 3-hour setting or stressful setting. Even though they get to work in teams, they still have to explain it to me, but it's okay to ask me questions. And I feel that, I'm part of the process in helping them build their knowledge even more so now than before. You do these activities or you do these mini lectures, but now you get to speak to a team and they're brainstorming, and 3 or 4 students are stumped on a question and they're all sharing ideas, and then I kind of jump in and share with them, and you kind of see those eureka moments. I find that to be very rewarding, and I don't know if I would have had that chance to do that outside of the setting, or at least not as frequently as I'm doing right now.
So do you have any advice to other teachers who are hoping to finish the winter 2020 semester with a similar approach?
The main thing I've had to really focus on switching online is being organized. I've had to be even more organized than normal. And at the same time, really flexible with the students. And just, there's always one person in each class, and it's never the same person, who can't for some reason join the meeting. They've got some technical problem. So it's always about just, I've tried to plan the course so should they not be able to join, they can still do everything on their own time. But at the same time, keep the class useful so that they want to join and don't just decide not to join.
Rhys?
For me, it's being flexible. The moment that students realized that there was flexibility and there was none of this rigid 3-hour exams, the level of stress went down. And I think that was a positive thing. All of my deadlines are suggested deadlines. And yes, I use Omnivox. So in Leia, some of them, it says, refuse assignments or submissions after the deadline. And they're all in a panic. And I just tell them that, no, if I don't put a deadline, no one will ever submit. But if you're late by a day, it's fine. And it's the kind of shock that they have this much flexibility. But at the same time, I don't know what the realities are. Some have expressed concern because they have to share devices at home. Some students end up having a few assessments on the same day because the other teachers have changed their schedule around. So I just try to do my best and say, okay, this is what I think would be ideal deadlines, and do the best to respect them. And once that stress level has gone down, I found it to be again positive for me, and I hope it was positive for them. So be flexible and be available to your students.
So thanks to Rhys Adams and Phoebe Jackson for joining us today to share your differing approaches to finishing the winter 2020 semester, albeit with some similarities. All the best to you for the coming weeks.
Thank you. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Ryan.
Thank you.